Welcome. Today, we're exploring the teachings of Jesus and his lessons on financial stewardship through parables. Many of the stories Jesus told focus on how we handle the resources God has entrusted to us. These parables are simple yet profound, offering us timeless wisdom about money, priorities, and serving God with what we have. Let's start with the parable of the talents, found in Matthew chapter 25, verses 14 to 30. In this story, a master gives 3 servants different amounts of money. One servant receives 5 talents, another 2, and the last just 1. The first 2 servants invest their talents and double what they were given. But the third servant, out of fear, buries his talent and does nothing with it. When the master returns, he praises the first 2 servants, saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant." But to the third servant he says, "You wicked, lazy servant." This parable teaches us that God entrusts us with resources, whether big or small, and he expects us to use them wisely. It's not about how much we have, but how faithful we are with what we've been given. Ask yourself, how can you invest your resources today to multiply their impact for God's kingdom? Next, we have the parable of the rich fool, found in Luke chapter 12, verses 13 to 21. This story warns us about the dangers of greed and misplaced priorities. A man's land produces an abundant harvest, and instead of using his wealth to bless others, he decides to hoard it. He builds bigger barns to store everything and thinks he can relax and enjoy life. But God says to him, "You fool! This very night your life will be demanded from you." The lesson here is clear. Life is short, and wealth is temporary. True riches come not from what we accumulate, but from living with generosity and purpose. Are you building barns to hoard your resources, or are you using them to serve God and others? Now, let's turn to the parable of the workers in the vineyard, from Matthew chapter 20, verses 1 to 16. A landowner hires workers at different times of the day, some in the morning, some in the afternoon, and others in the evening. At the end of the day, he pays them all the same wage. Those who worked the longest complain, but the landowner replies, "Don't I have the right to do what I want with my own money? Or, are you envious because I am generous?" This parable reminds us of 2 important truths. First, God is generous and gracious, and we should celebrate his blessings in others' lives instead of comparing ourselves. Second, it teaches us to trust God's provision. When you feel life is unfair, remember that God's economy is built on grace, not comparison. Next is the parable of the dishonest manager, found in Luke chapter 16, verses 1 to 13. In this story, a manager is accused of wasting his master's possessions. Before being fired, he reduces the debts of his master's clients to gain their favor. Surprisingly, the master commends him, not for his dishonesty, but for his shrewdness. Jesus explains, "Use worldly wealth to gain friends for yourselves, so that when it is gone, you will be welcomed into eternal dwellings." This parable challenges us to use our resources wisely and strategically. Money is a tool, and when used to serve others and advance God's purposes, it can have eternal significance. Are you using your resources in a way that makes an eternal impact? Finally, let's look at the parable of the widow's offering, found in Mark chapter 12, verses 41 to 44. Jesus watches as people give money at the temple. Among them is a poor widow who gives 2 small coins, all she has. Jesus says, "Truly I tell you, this poor widow has put more into the treasury than all the others." This parable reminds us that generosity is not about the amount, but the heart. The widow's faith and sacrifice matter more to God than the large sums others gave out of their abundance. It's a powerful example of trusting God and giving, even when it feels like we don't have much. From these parables, we learn that stewardship is a calling. Everything we have is a gift from God, and he calls us to manage it faithfully. Generosity is an act of worship that honors God. Earthly wealth is temporary, but how we use it has eternal consequences. And when we trust God's provision, we find peace and contentment. Which of these parables speaks to you the most? Is it the rich fool's lesson on avoiding greed, or the widow's offering and her remarkable faith? Let these lessons inspire you to live with wisdom, purpose, and generosity as you honor God with all that He has entrusted to you.